Okay, we'll get started then. Welcome everyone to our session today. We're really excited to be here again this year. Last year we had another panelist, and this is panel 4, talking about things about cybersecurity and what the scholarly publishing community is doing in this space. And so we're here again as part of SNSI, and so for those of you who don't know what SNSI is, it's the Scholarly Network Security Initiative, and we bring publishers, institutions together to tackle cyber threats to scholarly systems, research integrity, and personal data. We promote cyber defense tools like multi-factor authentication, share intelligence on cyber criminal activities, and raise awareness of cybersecurity risks, primarily in the academic market. So for today's session, my name is Sari Francis. I'm from Elsevier. I'm going to be moderating this session. And before we get started, I'll introduce you to our 2 panelists here. We have Juan Denzer, and Juan is the Engineering and Computer Science Librarian at Syracuse University. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science from Binghamton University and a Master of Library Science from the University at Buffalo. Juan currently serves on the AI Committee for Syracuse University Libraries, where he advises on AI technology for library services. Next, we have Isaac Galvin. Isaac is currently the Community Program Director, Cybersecurity and Privacy at EDUCAUSE. Isaac's mission is to ensure cyber safety is accessible to all. He's dedicated to creating positive security culture by delivering captivating training programs and workshops for everyone. So in today's session, we're going to be sharing findings from an international survey of nearly 300 librarians and 20 CISOs, highlighting current views and priorities on cybersecurity in higher education, some of which we are excited to share part of this with you today. So this was one of the questions and topics that, one of the key topics that was part of the survey. And the survey said librarians saw cybersecurity risk in libraries at least the same or higher than the rest of the entire institution. Some suggested that risk comes from using third-party vendor services. So I'm going to ask Juan and Isaac, what are some cases that you may have heard where an incident was due to third-party vendors being exploited by attackers?
Sure, I could talk about that first. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Isaac with EDUCAUSE, and we work with institutions all across the country on a number of cybersecurity fronts and privacy fronts, and a lot of that is with the IT folks at your institutions. So most of the time, the CISO or the information security office, whoever's at the top there will be one of the key people who come to our events and our conversations. So one thing we talk a whole lot about in that group and in those discussions is about third-party risk management. So anytime you're inviting another service provider or vendor into your ecosystem, be it your learning management system or your student information system platforms, you're sharing your institution's data with them. Now, what can go wrong? What could be the worst that happens, right? Well, a real example that I'll touch on was you might have heard of this MoveIt breach. MoveIt was a big platform for storing data and sharing data between institutions, and because of technical reasons that I won't bore you with, it left some open doors for bad actors to get into the customers of MoveIt, not MoveIt the company, but to get into the customers' data and steal it on a massive level. And sadly, a lot of that involved institutional data and even data about K through 12 students who are young and just getting started. Sad to say, those students are now set up for a lifetime of identity theft and things related to that information, and that's often not due to the institution's fault or misconfiguration, but because of who they were doing business with and their practices. So we work a lot with institutions to try to find ways to enumerate those threats and to help make sure that the partners that they're inviting to access their data are also thinking about those things and have good security practice at those companies. So that was one example. Yeah.
Thanks.
And I will say, I don't have a specific example, but I do have general examples how information from students can kind of be compromised. And what we see often, especially like when our IT reminds us about phishing emails, is a lot of times students, and I'll be honest, sometimes I'm guilty of this myself, is using the same institutional credentials, like their email and their student password for their accounts, for all these other accounts. So it could be something that, you know, they get a hold of their email because that's easily something that hackers can discover, but these students are using the same password for their Netflix or whatever other accounts, their private Gmail, and then they put two and two together, and then these things kind of infect our systems, and then they're like, okay, now they're accessing this, and then you'll have publishers like, wait, what just happened here? And a student will never be aware of that. So those are kind of the things that I see all the time, and that just doesn't change.
I'll share one more horror story about third parties gone wrong that you probably all remember, but maybe wasn't your fault. But CrowdStrike, the incident that happened earlier this year, I see a lot of head nodding. Some of you might have had the day off because your computer suddenly stopped working, not because of anything you did, but because of an arrangement and a software tool that was put into place that 99.9% of the time does a fantastic job. One of the well, I don't want to speak. It's a good product. I'll say that. Lots of people use it, but it just had a tremendous impact for a day, and that's because universities don't want to roll up their own security system. It doesn't make sense to develop that sort of thing and share that these things are necessary, but there are risks involved. So we all have to be aware of that in a lot of ways.
Great, thanks. So then how do you think that we can, sorry if I don't, so how can we strike the right balance between, security, protecting our systems, and making sure that we have that, availability? Because obviously in, with institutions, they feel like, there has to be a lot of open access, or access is very, very important. So how do we strike that balance between the two? Or how can we? Do you guys have what are your thoughts on that?
I think with the balance we need really is between all of kind of like the stakeholders, with those that manage the IT systems, the libraries, librarians, and the publishers. So I think the best way to really kind of help with that is through education. And I know it seems like very simplistic, but oftentimes, I always get emails like these fake emails from not always, but every now and then we will get these emails, these phishing emails, specifically from our IT, and it's like a way for them to like test us. And I know better as a computer scientist not to click on it, but I clicked on it anyway, right? Because I'm like, I don't know why, it just feels like being a bad. And then I got a follow-up email that says, okay, you fell for it, now you have to go through this online training. I was like, what? When did that happen? When is that a new policy? So I feel like if we start maybe working with them, and maybe not having such an aggressive thing of like, oh, now we're trying to trick students into that. But if we can educate them that way, rather than just having IT educate us on general security measures, kind of incorporate it with libraries as well, to maybe if you create one of these phishing emails, create it in a way that like has a publisher or something related to libraries, like, oh, your library account was locked, click on this email or something. Oftentimes I think that's, I think it's, and really have those to like educate our students on that, and not just like this overall like security problem, really kind of tie it into libraries.
Yeah, to build off that a little bit, one really successful strategy I've seen is for institutions is to learn how to communicate with their with community without consistently and with regular voice and a regular branding, and to make sure that it doesn't look like a fish, because you've probably seen real emails from your cybersecurity or your IT team that just have those little red flags because something about them is just off, but they're legitimate. So we're basically training people a lot of the times to go ahead and click on those phishing messages. So yeah, good opportunity. But that hacker mindset, it's so hard to resist not clicking on those links and seeing what could possibly happen.
Right. And I think the more that these phishing emails become more sophisticated, so it's not just like, oh, there's a different, like the way that ballroom is spelled is like 1 L instead of 2, and like, so those little things, like just the technology and the way that these bad actors are getting in, it's becoming more and more sophisticated, right? So it becomes challenging for everybody, right?
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible that like over the years, it's progressed, like you
Right.
said, to where you have to click and download a file or something, so it installs it. A lot of these like tricks that they're doing, you just even open the email. You don't
Right,
even click
right,
on
right.
anything, and all of a sudden, something in the background gets installed in your machine, and then now the hacker has access to your whole machine, and they're just pulling all this information, and you have no idea what's going on in the background. And that's really, it's really scary that it even exists.
And sometimes they will use legitimate business systems to carry out their attack. So the tools that you use in your everyday work, they turn them against us. And if they're able to gain access to an account, and that's why every account matters. So I think people need to make sure to protect their institutional accounts, because that is an in for, they call it lateral movement. You want to move laterally through a system. One compromised account could get you 10 more.
Yes. So speaking of advanced technology, I know AI is, the elephant in the room, the canary in the coal mine, and a whole other bunch of animals, right? So it's arguably the most important thing being discussed today. And I think that's because we're all living it, and no one really knows, no one knows how to understand it, comprehend it, plan for it. There's so many facets of it. So it's, constantly changing and evolving. So, when we have this question and we pose to some of the CISOs, we're, looking at AI and the growing use of AI within, with cyber threats. So with the rapid adoption of these tools in academic settings, what new data security risks are emerging? So I'm going to ask that to you guys on what you think about that.
Yeah, I think, so from a cybersecurity practitioner's perspective, I'll put on my cybersecurity hat, and one of the big things that we worry about, we call it insider threat. An insider threat is insiders. You all are insiders. You all have appropriate access to privileged information that the general public doesn't have access to, be that systems or certain information data, or even performance reviews for maybe people you manage and things like that. All sorts of systems that you are an insider to. There's a lot of opportunity for that stuff to be inadvertently linked and leaked out or breached, and AI just heightened that so much in the way that some of these initial services were introduced. You all maybe have this still, or maybe your institution has taken steps, but remember when people's AI assistants would start joining meetings uninvited. You'd be sitting there in a meeting and it would pop up and say, so-and-so's AI agent has arrived and is taking notes for them. Maybe you haven't witnessed that, but there was a rash of these things happening, and nobody invited that. Nobody knew, these services were popping up out of nowhere with very little understanding of what they were, but because of the nature of how Zoom worked or whatever other video conferencing tools, they were able to jump in and participate in our meetings as if they were one of us, and listen in to the conversation and record it. And sometimes these meetings had sensitive data discussed in them, or personal information that isn't public, and now it's shared with a third party. Now we're talking about a data breach, and now we're talking about a data breach of unknown scope, because we don't know who this person is or what this company is. We don't have an agreement with them. So it's really, really a frightening thing. A lot of groups are looking at policy and discussing what's appropriate AI use guidelines with their institutions. I hear from other conversations around here at this conference that a lot of institutions have yet to taken that step to have a formalized discussion about what kind of information you should be using, or even issuing guidance that says these tools are acceptable, these tools are not. We would love to see more progress made in that area, and have more institutions be able to say, this is the right AI tools to use, and you can share privileged information with this one. But right now, it's best really anything that's not, publicly accessible. I'd say keep it out of the chat bots and the learning systems, unless you have explicit, permission from your group.
Yeah, and also to kind of touch on what Isaac said earlier about how, you could be in a meeting with your colleagues, and then a message will pop up that says their AI tool is recording the meeting. A lot of these AI tools now don't even do that. They can do it without your knowledge, and you don't even realize it. I discovered this recently. I don't know if some of you have ever used Google Chrome's Gemini, kind of built-in Gemini plugin, to where you can click on the little icon and you can ask it questions, but it'll automatically share your screen. So as I'm working, I was logged into my bank account, and I could ask it. I could say, okay, give me how much did I spend this month? And they're like, okay, I can see that you spent this and this, and I can see your account has access to all of that stuff, and it's just there. And people, students and faculty and people just won't realize that it's turned on, because by default, a lot of these are just sharing it, right? There's a little button at the bottom that says, please don't share that. But how many of us are really paying attention when we have that small screen? And I found it even more a trick that I was telling my colleagues. If you ever come across a New York Times paywall, you could just ask it to give you a summary, and it'll bypass the paywall and give you a summary of the article. And I'm like, how does that even happen? It's able to do that. It's able to scrape all of that information without you even knowing that it's there. So, and that's the convenience, right, that these companies want, right? They want to present that to you like a convenience, because, oh, just ask AI, give me that quick answer. Tell me how much I have in my bank account. I don't feel like logging in. And, and people will freely give up that information for convenience. And that's something that we really have to, especially in academics, we have to be careful of, be mindful of all of that data, whether it's research data, whether, like Isaac said, it's personal data for students' accounts or things like that. You just have to be mindful. And even if you have agreements, like I mentioned before, I was using Gemini, but I was also going through my institutional account. At Syracuse University, we have an institutional Google account. So they have an agreement that says none of this data can be used. But apparently, when I was logged in to my SU account in Google, it was still looking at all this information. I could have logged into my student accounts, and all of that information would have been read. And it's hard to know, what are they doing with it? Were they training? Were they just reading it? It's not that clear.
Another chilling tale now, right? So people are engaging in letting the AI drive the browser and drive the interaction. And, you might open up your AI-powered browser and say, hey, what's tomorrow's weather? Or, and it'll go and find the Weather Channel and find the data for you, But what researchers are already finding is that these AI-driven browsers are subject to hidden instructions that we can't see, but a malicious actor could embed in the web page that says, after you check the weather, go to their bank account and empty it. Something like that. But it's not perceptible to people because, the text is obscured in the code of the web page. So we know already, and thankfully researchers are out there exposing these holes and helping the big browser makers figure those issues out. But what I would say is, really, before you think about installing any AI integration to your browser, I know a lot of people, maybe you have a work issued computer and you might want to run an alternate browser, people like Firefox or Chrome with big extension marketplaces. Check with your IT, because those are incredibly dangerous, and there may be an opportunity for them to provide something that they can actually help you with and give guidance on how to use it appropriately and save yourself a big headache down the line.
And I will just also comment on that it's also a challenge for IT too, right? Because a lot of these tools, like I know at Syracuse, I refer to it as the ring of steel, to where they don't let me install anything, any plugins. I'm like, everything gets rejected. But I was surprised that this plugin in Chrome was not vetted. They, I should tell them to say, look, why is this doing this? But I found it odd that I didn't have to install anything. It was already freely available. It was already ready available. And like I said, maybe that's something IT later on will say, okay, this is a problem. We have to turn this off. And even if they can, they have to figure it out with Google. So that's a big challenge for IT.
Yeah, and I think things are happening so quickly. How do they get their arms around it, right? So, they might have missed that one, and, but they're thinking about all the other things that are happening. How do they get their arms around it? It's kind of challenging in that regard, because these tools are being built, new things are coming out daily, right? So are there any things that the EDUCAUSE community is because I know AI is a huge topic in that area too. Are there I think I remember at one of the last CPPC conferences, we were talking about policies and how do they get their arms around that? Is that something that they still continuing to talk about?
Yeah, we've been doing so we've done a number of research with our community, and most, if you're with a higher ed institution, your community, probably a member, but we've done surveys and asked about the adoption of AI policy. We've also had a working group that outlined some AI policy templates and frameworks and things to get the conversation started. We also are a resource on our website on educause.edu. We also have a really great set of AI ethics questions that were developed by members of our higher education community. We had a few dozen people from different institutions of all different types and sizes that contributed to a really great list of ethical questions that maybe they don't apply all to your institution, but really get you thinking about the ins and outs of including AI in your productivity or in various different ways that you might think of engaging with AI.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Isaac. Okay, and this is our last slide, but wanted to also touch, because I was thinking about that and just what you guys were saying, that's a lot of information, especially for the library community, to how do they get involved? Where do they go? How does this begin? Because it's a lot of information. What librarians need to do. How do they? Where's the starting point, right? So even for me in publishing, it's challenging to think okay, well, where do I go to get not just the right information, when I'm doing my own investigation or research on things, but making sure that I know what steps to take. And I think yesterday we were also talking offline, at lunch or whatever, about having that risk register and things like that. But a lot of these things we're not sure of who would need, which stakeholders in the community need to be, I don't want to say accountable, it's not the right word, but how do we empower, what's our role in this space, right? Because I think everybody might have a different perspective of what their role is. So I don't know what you guys are thinking about that, as far as what do you think your role is in that regard?
Sure. So one thing, a resource that EDUCAUSE is helps to promote and our community has developed is called the HECVAT. It's the Higher Education Community Vendor Assessment Toolkit. It's been through several different iterations. We're on version 4.12, I think, right now, but on our website you can get the latest version. And it is a great questionnaire. It started as a security-centric questionnaire that you would ask to your third party or any service provider who you want to exchange data with. And it started as a security questionnaire, but now, because of the community feedback and suggestions from the community, it includes a set of questions involved around privacy, about protecting the privacy of the people who are using the service. It's got a set of questions around digital accessibility, because those are such important concerns, and your institutions probably have a lot of compliance requirements too when it comes to digital accessibility. It involves questions about AI adoption. It involves questions about processes and practices. So it really is intended to have a holistic view of what working with a partner on cybersecurity is about, in all the different facets, and hopefully the right chairs to bring to the table when making a technology acquisition. We fully understand not every institution has every role filled, but it is a great spot to have that conversation around, so that you're not missing some key considerations in bringing a new technology in.
So I would say, as a librarian and for libraries, our role really is, it's always been to protect data privacy for our patrons, right? It's always been our role to ensure that information is available, whether it's, open access or through publishers. That's important. But I think one of the roles that is really important, at least I know when I started in 2010 in librarianship, is libraries and librarians need to serve as educators for other stakeholders, right? Especially like in IT. They need to understand what we do, what our patrons need, what information should be available, because oftentimes these departments, they work differently, and I understand that. I worked in IT. I know we can just have that attitude of like, well, I don't, an IT could look at it and say, well, I don't see the benefit of this tool. I don't see why this should be available this way. And then on the same side, librarians and libraries will say, well, I don't see the need for security, or I don't see the need why we need to be so protective of, our accounts, or something to that level. So there has to be like this gap that gets bridged between. And then of course comes in the publishers that kind of like also, it's for some stakeholders, it's a mystery, right? For IT, it might be a mystery of what they want, what they do. So it's definitely in my best interest as a librarian and libraries to just be an advocate to say, okay, this is what we need, this is what we do. You have any questions, I will answer it from the librarian side. And then I can put on my other hat and be like, well, I've worked in IT, I know the technology side, I'll flip over and help, bridge that as well. So I think that's where, and honestly, I think that's where Sari and I worked well when we started a long time ago working with Easy Proxy. She always mentions that, but I think it worked well because she was like, okay, Juan, I know what you're talking about. And then I'm like, okay, Sari, you're educating me on the publisher side. Now I know what you're talking about. So
Right.
and it works hand in hand.
I love that you mentioned, with the tools and the difference bridging the gap. We've seen this in our surveys. So we did a survey, issued some very similar questions, one to a group of teaching and learning community and one to the group of the cybersecurity community. And on the question of what technologies has the most negative impact on your job performance, what technology affects your job performance negatively, the cybersecurity people did, some of them, 7% did say cybersecurity solutions had a negative impact on their job, but the teaching and learning people, 29% of them reported that cybersecurity solutions had a negative impact on their job. So, having that gap and showing, like, sadly, sometimes the solutions do inconvenience your day-to-day job, things like single sign-on or new MFA implementations. I know we've all had to be there where now you need to have this on you all the time to log into your computer. Was really inconvenient when we started talking about it. But it was a growing struggle. And I'll say having that MFA has dramatically reduced the number of incidents your institutions are seeing. I could promise you that without looking at their numbers, but being able to do MFA I know it's a huge pain in the rear, but it certainly helps. The same way the cybersecurity tools with agents, a lot of your computers now have an agent, maybe CrowdStrike or something similar installed on it. When there is a breach, that helps them in infinite ways to know how wide the breach went, how much data was stolen, because otherwise, without that sort of visibility into what's happening on the computers, we would never know what was stolen. We would have no idea what data was taken off of your system or who was on there or what they were doing with it. All of those systems are to help figure out what happened when a breach happens, because a breach is probably going to happen.
And I will say, too, and this is something I personally love about librarians and librarianship, is that we love to learn. Like, every time I mention things about this, you know, IT's like, oh, IT just pointed out this, and then the librarians are like, wow, that is really interesting. And they're not being fake about it, they're being honest about it. So that sharing of information, at least on the librarian side, I can talk to my colleagues who, you know, they don't work in IT, they don't know any of these systems, they could be like in the humanities, and then when I tell them about these new systems, or I tell them about what AI is doing and how, they're like, wow, Juan, thanks, I learned something today, and I think that's great, you know, and of course I learned from them with other things that are non-tech related.
And then another lovely way, I'll just tack on one more, I've
Sure.
got the microphone still, that I'd love to see the library and cybersecurity work together is creating awareness of the cybersecurity issues and the skills that the students need to have when they come to university. Sadly, getting that .edu account makes you a target. And it's not, don't think it's always the younger digital native people who are coming into your institutions with their fresh account. Yes, that's probably a lot of it, 17 and 18-year-olds who have been on the internet online. But depending on the demographics of your organization, it might also be middle-aged learners. It might be late-in life learners. It might be people who are attending, you know, the police academy or the fire training institute that your university hosts. So there's a whole variety of people that probably haven't had to use a computer, maybe or maybe not, use a computer in their professional life before that. Using the library as a center point to be a way to share those literacies and the things that they need to know, much like you might engage in a media literacy or a financial literacy course. So I know a lot of libraries help carry out those kinds of activities. I would love to see more cybersecurity and privacy literacy coming out of the libraries and helping get those students as part of learning how to learn, right? Like also learn how to protect yourself when you're out there navigating the digital landscape.
Yeah, and I will just add to what Isaac said. Yeah, we really need to educate them with that email, that .edu address, that treat it the same way you treat your social security number, your bank account number. I know it doesn't seem like that should be the case, but I can give you a really good example where I was like very hesitant of putting my email. So I signed up. Before we had the Google account, I signed up for the free one that Google was offering for Gemini for education. And when I put in my email address, they just verified that it said .edu, and then they sent me a code, and then I was able to get like free access for a whole year. I tried that with ChatGPT. They went through a third-party system, or they were going to because I stopped. They were going to go through a third-party system to verify that I was an actual student enrolled in a program. And I'm like, that is a lot of information for me to give out. And it's not worth it. It was only for like 30 days free ChatGPT. But I could see how students with other incentives like that will be like, okay, let me just give that. And it goes through this third-party system to verify their ID. And they're not aware that that could be very harmful in the future. Somehow that could get compromised later down the road.
So I know we can continue to talk about this. I have like so many other questions, and you know, we were just talking about the risks, and you know, but I think collaboration is totally key, and what you guys were just saying about educational efforts. And we do through a SNSI, and I also put up some of the links here from EDUCAUSE too about what Isaac was touching on about the teaching and learning and the cybersecurity privacy. SNSI has also created some tools as well. We have a toolkit which will help librarians be able to have those conversations with IT. So they're speaking different languages. Like Juan is able to obviously put on both hats. So he has an advantage there in that space, but not everybody has that ability. So we have that toolkit, and we also have a new IP address management document that will also help you to learn more about how to best use, the access that you have with IP addresses, and how to better secure your IPs. So with that, I will just go to some questions.